Texas officials are now holding a press conference on the shooting that happened today in Sutherland Springs, Texas. We see Governor Greg Abbott about to address the media. Let's listen.
Great citizens of Stockdale for opening up this community center, for pitching in and helping out, and continuing to demonstrate to the entire world the way that Texans come together to help their fellow Texans. As a state, we are dealing with the largest mass shooting in our state's history. There's so many families who've lost family members, fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters. The tragedy, of course, is worsened by the fact that it occurred in a church, a place of worship, where these people were innocently gunned down. We mourn their loss, but we support their family members. We appreciate the first responders and what they've done to help respond to this challenge. They are continuing in their efforts as they put all the pieces of a very complex puzzle together to try to provide their community all the answers they need and deserve. Unfortunately, I'm sad to tell you, to confirm, at least at this moment in time, there are 26 lives that have been lost. We don't know if that number will rise or not. All we know is that's too many. And this will be a long, suffering mourning for those in pain. We ask for God's comfort, for God's guidance, and for God's healing for all those who are suffering. As governor, I ask for every mom and dad at home tonight that you put your arm around your kid and give your kid a big hug and let them know how much you love them, knowing that we support each other. Tell your friend and your neighbor that you support them and that you will work with them. I'm very proud of the way that we have so many people working together to respond to this. Already, in talking to the emergency team in Texas, it's reported that the Emergency Medical Task Force from San Antonio was deployed to help respond to the magnitude of this tragedy. San Antonio area hospitals and trauma centers have coordinated with regard to patient movement and patient care. The Red Cross has set up Family Assistance Center to help all families affected by this. One thing that is very important for everybody affected by this, whether you're a family member or non-family member, is that you avail yourself of counseling resources that will be made readily available in abundance. Now, we have so many people who have helped respond in coordinated fashion already. I want to express my gratitude to the President who called from overseas, my gratitude to Senators Cornyn and Cruz, with whom I've already spoken, as well as members of the Texas legislature. But when you look at the robust response from just the immediate area, I want to express my gratitude to the Sheriff of Wilson County, to the District Attorney from this area, Audrey Lewis. The reason I say this area is because her territory is larger than just Wilson County. And to DPS Regional Director Freeman Martin. Each of those three will be speaking shortly. But also to the mayor of the area where we are located right now, the mayor of Stockdale, to the Department of Homeland Security, to the ATF, the FBI, the Bexar County Sheriff's Office, the Guadalupe County Sheriff's Office, the Wilson County Sheriff's Office, the Livonia Police Department, the Stockdale City Marshal's Office, and the Seguin Police Department. And I have no doubt that there are other law enforcement as well as emergency agencies that have responded to this. And I regret if I did not mention you. Just know that we appreciate the profound way that everybody's come together. I would like to now turn things over to Sheriff Joe Tackett from Wilson County, in whose jurisdiction the crime occurred and whose jurisdiction we're in right now.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you for your kind words. We all in here know what happened today, and it's something we all say does not happen in small communities. Well, we found out today it does. We need your support. You know, as media, don't blow it out there that, you know, it should have never happened, because it does happen. And we sincerely feel sorry for all of the people that are involved. We don't know names of any of the victims at this time, because we're still trying to work the crime scene. As we get the names, we're going to be contacting family members and letting them know what we have. But at this time, we don't have any names of any of the victims. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is the District Attorney, Audrey Lewis.
Thank you all. We know that you have lots of questions that you want answers to, but understand this. Our #1 priority and goal is to the victims and their families at this point, and we ask that you respect that as well. We want to make sure to notify victims' families before media gets a hold of that information. It is critical to those families that if we have bad news to bear, they need to hear it before it's announced on the media, and we're going to try to work to ensure that that occurs. We have lots of law enforcement who are all working very well together with federal and local and state agencies, and we highly commend the professionalism that's occurring. But because we have to make sure that that crime scene is handled appropriately, it takes time. And unfortunately, that leaves a lot of victims' families wanting answers that we don't really have for them at this very moment. We will be updating them as soon as we have information and providing that information so that they have the answers they need to deal with either the loss or go to their loved ones who may be in the hospital. We appreciate the work of all law enforcement, and we appreciate you guys. We know that you're trying to get out information. We don't feel there is a threat that's continuing, and I think that the media has done a pretty good job of making sure that that's been pronounced to the public. But we are working very diligently both to inform the families and to preserve that crime scene and make sure that it's handled appropriately. So thank you all for your time.
And next is DPS Regional Director Freeman Martin.
Everybody here wants facts, wants information about what's going on, and we'd love to provide you more. But if you came here wanting to know the motive behind this shooting, you're going to leave here disappointed. We have certain facts that we can release to protect the integrity of the investigation. We have to release it in a timely fashion and collect the facts and make sure our information is correct before we release it. We're here assisting the Sheriff, Joe Tackett. There's multiple agencies involved: DPS, Texas Rangers, FBI, HSI, ATF, Bexar County SO, and many, many others. We are all working together to support the Sheriff in this investigation. At approximately 11:20 this morning, a suspect was seen at a Valero gas station in Sutherland Springs, Texas. He was dressed in all black. That suspect crossed the street to the church, exited his vehicle, and began firing at the church. That suspect then moved to the right side of the church and continued to fire. That suspect entered the church and continued to fire. As he exited the church, a local resident grabbed his rifle and engaged that suspect. The suspect dropped his rifle, which was a Ruger AR assault-type rifle, and fled from the church. Our local citizen pursued the suspect at that time. A short time later, as law enforcement responded, that suspect, right at the Wilson, Guadalupe County line, he ran off the roadway and crashed out and was found deceased in his vehicle. At this time, we don't know if it was a self-inflicted gunshot wound or if he was shot by our local resident who engaged him in gunfire. We know he's deceased in the vehicle. The suspect has not been completely identified. We believe he's a young white male, maybe in his early 20s. He was dressed in all black tactical type gear and was wearing a ballistic vest. The delay in getting him identified is there were multiple weapons in the vehicle, and the vehicle has been processed by our Texas Ranger Special Operations Group bomb techs. There's a lot of work to be done in this investigation. We know that there are 23 found deceased inside the church, 2 deceased outside the church, and now one of them that was transported that was injured has deceased, bringing the total to 26. We have approximately 20 that are transported local and in hospitals in San Antonio with injuries that vary from minor to very severe. We know the ages range from 5 years old to 72 years of age. There's a lot of work to be done. We are only hours into this investigation, which is going to take a significant length of time. We will continue to provide information as it becomes available. We know you're going to have a lot of questions. There are many, many that we cannot answer. We continue to process crime scenes. We have multiple crime scenes. We have the church. We have outside the church. We have where the suspect vehicle was located. We have following up on the suspect and where he's from, his residence. We have many, many people to interview. We have Texas Rangers at all the hospitals locating those and interviewing those who were injured. So not a lot of information to give at this time, but the state of Texas, we have every resource that we have available. Texas Rangers, Special Operations, Texas Highway Patrol, Crime Scene Labs, Victim Services, the Texas Division of Emergency Management. Every resource we have available is working, and at the end of this investigation, we'll be able to answer any reasonable question as to what happened.
Was the neighbor injured? The one that engaged in fighting?
No, he was not. With that,
Great. Well, thank you all, and thanks once again to law enforcement at all levels, from the local level to the state level to the federal level. The collaborative working relationship is one that will ensure a swift and certain evaluation of exactly what happened, and we will provide that explanation as quickly as possible. We will be leaving here and going to meet with some of the family members of those affected as soon as we finish up, but we'll take a few questions.
How many were in the church and how many escaped death or being wounded?
Anybody who knows that, feel free.
we don't have those numbers. There were people in the church that escaped that were not injured, but we don't have all that information. I'm sorry.
Was most being held at the time?
Yes.
Was the suspected shooter a part of any sort of known militia group? Is that being investigated?
Not at this time.
That is being investigated, but we can't say one way or the other.
What about him was suspicious to begin with, or what initiated the original call?
Those are the types of things that are under intense investigation right now, and hopefully we will learn about them in the next 24 hours.
The revised total of victims, that does not include the shooter, correct?
Correct.
That's correct.
Can you tell us anything about a possible raid at the suspect's home?
All those types of things will be pieces of information that will be coming out shortly. Yes.
Did you know anything about any social media postings that he might have hinted that he would have done this?
All of those types of things are being looked into as we speak.
We take one more question.
When are you going to release the shooter's family?
Say it again.
The shooter's family was in attendance at the church at the time, or had any mention?
Unaware of that.
When we release his name?
As soon as possible.
Was he known to the community or was he an outsider?
We will confirm that when we learn it.
How can people help?
As I think you're realizing, there's a lot of information. We want to piece the puzzle together before we provide you any misinformation, and we want to make sure that we meet with the family members who are affected by this before we release information publicly. We hope to get this information to you as soon as possible. Thank you all very much.
And the call that came in was an active shooter. There was no calls that came in of a suspicious person or anything before.
So how did y'all know he was at the Valero?
After the fact, we started investigating and found out that he was
Videotape of the service?
No, they haven't gotten it yet.
Okay, we were listening in there to a news conference with the governor and several law enforcement officials from Texas as they just briefed the nation on what the governor called the largest mass shooting in Texas history. He confirmed at least 26 people lost their lives as a gunman opened fire inside a small church in Sutherland Springs, Texas this morning around 11:30 this morning during the church service. We did get additional information about exactly what unfolded. Let me walk you through that in case you missed it. They've since learned, as they pieced this together, that there was a sighting of the gunman around 11:20 this morning at a nearby gas station, a Valero gas station. The suspect was seen dressed in all black. We learned he fired from outside the church first and continued firing as he entered the church. We know the victims range in age from 5 to 72 years old. Again, at least 26 people are dead. Many others have been taken to the hospital. That suspect continued firing in the church and then eventually left. We understand a citizen grabbed his or her gun and returned fire, and in fact pursued the suspect after the suspect left the church. The suspect was eventually found away from the scene and was dead. Police don't know right now if he died from his own self-inflicted gunshot wound or from a wound sustained by the return fire from that citizen who bravely followed that suspect and tried to save many other lives. We don't have a name yet. Officials would not give an identity of the name. They say that they believe he is a young white male, perhaps in his early 20s is the age range, they said, dressed in all black, tactical gear, and a ballistics vest. I want to bring in our law enforcement experts, including analyst James Galliano. He is a retired FBI supervisory agent for the FBI, and Cheryl Dorsey, who is a retired LAPD police sergeant. James, another thing we learned was that he used an AR assault rifle, according to the DPS regional director there. What does that tell you?
Sure. They said that it was a Ruger, and we've heard that it's a .223 round, which is the 5.56 NATO standard round. These are very popular weapons. My guess, I was an FBI firearms instructor. I did see a lot of these before. They're called the Bushmaster. It's a Ruger Mini 14. That's my guess. Very popular out west. Again, let's be careful. If this weapon had not been modified, if it was not modified, it's a semi-automatic weapon. Now, you can put 20-round magazines into a semi-automatic weapon or a 30-round magazine into a semi-automatic weapon. And those type of weapons, if you squeeze the trigger a number of different times, you can put downrange a lot of fire. But not to confuse an automatic weapon with what this appears to be, which was a semi-automatic weapon. I can't say enough about the bravery and the heroism of the next-door neighbor to the church who came out with his own rifle from the house and probably ended up interdicting the shooter enough so, or getting him distracted enough where he was, forced to run off, jump into his vehicle, and apparently left his weapon behind. Very, very heroic act there.
Sergeant Dorsey, what stood out to you from that press conference?
Well, there's so much that we haven't heard, and I'm really curious to know if there were more magazines for this weapon, if this individual, and we'll find this out later, if he was able to purchase it legitimately. And also, I'm curious to know, when they find out, about any associates. I mean, was this just a one-time thing, or were there other targets planned? Were there other events? Did he communicate this with anyone? And now we just have to really be mindful about how we comport ourselves no matter where we are, because we're not safe at church, we're not safe at school, we're not safe in a theater. And we need to be mindful of that and really give particular attention to how we comport ourselves in these places that used to be safe zones.
Why do you think they are not releasing the suspect's identity at this point, James?
It's hard to tell. There could be a number of different reasons. One is they could be wanting to determine for certain that there were no co-conspirators. They don't want to spook somebody that might have had some type of connection to this or provided some type of material
Which
support.
on that, they did say, the district attorney said they do not believe there's additional threat.
Right, absolutely. But just because there's not an additional threat doesn't mean that somebody might not have possibly provided material support. And sometimes that material support could be unwitting. Somebody that might have provided him with extra weapons or extra ammunition or pointed out where the church was. You want to find all those people, and you want to make sure you get in contact with them, so they're being very, very cautious. I think it's also important to point out to my colleague's earlier point that as this paradigm, this active shooter thing becomes, unfortunately, more and more prevalent in our minds, it's very important to put out. The FBI has been teaching this now for some time, which is, what do people do when something like this happens? And the run, hide, fight tell in that order. And a number of times where I've talked to people offset about what should you do in a situation like that, it's just that situational awareness. Unfortunately, again, going into a church, you don't expect that you need to have situational awareness, but it could be something as simple and as effective and important as just knowing where the exits are. Because I'm sure once the gunman came in, apparently came in through the front doors and started shooting away, people were probably confused as to where to run to, and knowing where exits are is very, very important.
Was it important to note, Cheryl, that this shooter apparently started firing even before entering the church, that he was firing outside the church at the doors and then continued to fire? Does that provide any additional clue in your mind?
I mean, we can speculate. There's no way to know. It's quite possible that there was someone outside that he engaged, and he wanted to deal with that person, if you will, to kind of put them at a disadvantage or to prevent them from engaging him, right? And so if there was someone that he encountered outside, he dealt with them and then he continued on. And so thankfully, this next door neighbor was able to come out, because it's not clear to me from the press conference whether it's this person's interaction that caused him to flee, or if it was because as he was fleeing, then this person took action. Had that person not involved himself in this situation, it could have been so much worse in terms of casualties and people injured.
Oh my, to even think about that. Tough to go there. We know that he was wearing tactical gear, according to the law enforcement official, Regional Director Freeman Martin, and he had a ballistics vest on. He was dressed in all black. We are also learning from our sources, according to our CNN Justice correspondent Evan Perez, who's been talking with his law enforcement official sources, James, that the shooter also had other firearms in his vehicle. That's what law enforcement found when they encountered him. Does that suggest that he was planning what?
It certainly, and again, it's supposition at this early juncture, but I mean, was this something where the shooter was a gun enthusiast? Was this a shooter, somebody who was a hunter? Or could this shooter possibly have been somebody with a military background? These are all things that the investigators are now going through, because it's very easy, if they have a name now, they go and they look up and see if there's a DD-214, which is the government document that shows military service, and go back and find out whether or not the fact that he was dressed in all black, the fact that he acted tactically, was something that he might have done because he had military service.
James Galliano, Cheryl Dorsey, thank you both.